Welcome to HFY Codex. If you love epic sci-fi stories where humanity shines, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for thrilling HFY adventures. Join us and be part of the journey. Asterisk the touch that changed everything. Asterisk the two suns were setting over the silver towers of Alaria when the human ship landed near the Royal Plaza. Jace stepped out slowly, wearing a clean, dark uniform, his boots crunching against the soft crystal. Ground aliens from many species watched him silently, but one pair of glowing violet eyes followed his every move closely from a high balcony. Princess Kelia stood tall and graceful, her long blue hair swaying in the breeze. Her heart beating faster than usual. She had never seen a human before. Only read about them in the old scrolls and heard the warnings from the elders. Humans were curious, unpredictable, men far too physical. They liked to touch things, and Illyrian culture considered that dangerous. Kelia was not afraid. But she stayed alert as Jace entered the sacred hall to meet the royal council. Jace bowed as trained, his voice calm and polite as he introduced himself as Earth's envoy of peace and knowledge. The queen nodded without smiling, and Kelia stepped forward to present the ceremonial bowl of star sand. As custom demanded, she handed it over without physical contact. But in that moment, a sudden slip. One grain of star sand fell near the edge, and Jace instinctively reached to catch it. His fingers brushed her hand, skin to skin, for only a second. Everyone froze, including Kelia. A soft, golden light flared on the back of her neck. A mark shaped like a half-moon and spiral appeared, glowing like a firefly. Gasps echoed in the chamber, and the queen stood sharply, her voice trembling. "The soul mark," she whispered. "It has awakened." Kelia looked down at her hand, then at Jace, and finally touched the glowing mark with her fingertips. "No," she muttered under her breath. "That's not possible." The chamber turned chaotic. Elders whispering, guards stepping forward, but no one dared touch the princess. Jace stood, still confused but calm, not understanding what had just happened. One elder turned to him with serious eyes. "Human, your contact has triggered the ancient soulmate indicator. Do you know what this means?" The elder asked. Jace shook his head slowly. "No, sir." Kelia couldn't speak. Her throat dry, her voice gone, her legs slightly shaking. The queen took a deep breath, then ordered, "The human will stay under watch until we understand what this connection means." That night, Kelia sat in her private chamber, staring at her reflection. The mark was still there, glowing faintly like a warm ember, refusing to fade. She had studied soulmate legends, of course, but no one in the last 100 years had ever triggered a soul mark, and now it had happened with a human. She touched her neck again and whispered, "It can't be him." In the guest wing, Jace sat on a soft floor cushion, surrounded by guards, unsure of what to say or do. He replayed the moment over and over in his head. The gentle warmth of her skin, the light, the silence that followed. A royal servant brought him food and water, but said nothing. Only bowed and left quickly. Outside, night fell, stars lighting up the sky like slow-moving rivers. Kelia couldn't sleep, her mind full of questions and memories. She remembered being a child and hearing her mother say that soul marks were destinies. Voice they could not be faked nor ignored. But what if destiny made a mistake? In the early morning, Kelia decided to face him again. She walked quietly into the guest wing, surprising the guards, and motioned for privacy, alone with Jace. She looked at him silently, then spoke. "You didn't know what would happen," she said calmly. Jace shook his head. "I didn't mean to offend." "You didn't?" she replied. But something impossible just happened. Jace tilted his head. "Is the mark dangerous?" Kelia hesitated, then answered, "No, but it changes everything." She stepped closer, just enough to see his eyes clearly. "We don't choose our soulmates," she said. "The mark does. And now it says you're mine." Jace didn't move, only breathed slowly, his voice gentle. "I'm just a mechanic's son from Earth." He said, "I came to learn, not to bond." Kelia gave a small smile for the first time. Though it didn't reach her eyes, perhaps the universe has other plans. She said softly. They stood there, facing each other, silent again. The golden mark glowed brighter, as if agreeing with her words. Outside, the first rays of morning lit the sky. But neither of them looked away. Everything had changed. Neither of them knew what came next. But one thing was clear. The touch that changed everything was no accident. It was the beginning of something written long before they were born. And it had only just begun. Forbidden bond. The sun barely rose above the crystal trees when the queen summoned her daughter to the inner chamber. Kelia walked in with her back straight and her face calm, but inside her chest, everything felt like a storm. The royal guards stood still like statues, but the silence in the room was heavy. Her mother, the queen, looked tired but firm, her long, silver robe flowing like smoke as she spoke. "You touched him again," the queen said, without turning her head. The mark grew brighter. Kelia nodded slowly. "I had to be sure." The queen finally faced her, eyes full of both fear and sorrow. "This is forbidden, Kelia," she said. "No Illyrian has ever bonded with a human, but the mark chose him," Kelia replied, her voice quiet but strong. "I didn't." "There are laws older than our blood," the queen said, "and if the bond deepens, it could change everything." Kelia didn't answer, her hands curling into fists at her side. Later that day, Jace was taken to a quiet garden behind the palace. Surrounded by alien trees with glowing leaves, Kelia joined him. Walking through the archway without guards this time, he looked up and gave her a soft nod. "No soldiers today." She sat beside him on a stone bench, not smiling. "I convinced them I wouldn't bite." "I believe you," Jace replied, his voice gentle. "Though I still don't understand this soul mark thing." Kelia sighed and looked at the strange stars above. "Illyrian soul marks are ancient," she said. "They only appear once in a lifetime, and only when we touch our fated one." Jace stayed quiet, letting the wind speak between them for a moment. "And you're sure it's real?" he finally asked. "Not just a reaction or a mistake?" Kelia shook her head slowly. "No mistake, no science," she said. "The mark doesn't lie." He looked down at his hands. "Then I've broken a rule just by existing." She turned to him quickly. "No, you didn't choose this either." He gave a short laugh. "Lucky me." Kelia's gaze softened, and for the first time, she reached forward without hesitation. She touched the side of his arm, light, slow, gentle. The mark on her neck flared bright gold again, and in that moment, Jace felt something too. Not pain, not heat, but like someone whispering his name in the back of his mind. Kelia's hand pulled back fast, her eyes wide. "You felt it?" Jace blinked, nodding slowly. "Yes, like something calling." The garden lights dimmed, and a breeze swept over them as if the air itself understood what had just happened. Far above, unseen by them, a small blue sphere hidden in the sky glowed faintly. The ancient watchers had noticed. That night, the queen met with the high priestess in the sacred mirror hall. "She's touching him again," the queen said, her voice heavy with fear. "And the mark is no longer hers alone." The priestess placed her hand over the glowing mirror pool and whispered something in the old language. A ripple showed a glimpse. The girl and the human, side by side, the mark between them pulsing as one. "The bond is real," the priestess confirmed. "And growing fast. If it completes, we cannot undo it," the queen said, "not even with exile." The priestess gave a slow nod. "Then you must choose, Your Grace," she said. "Accept the prophecy or stop it before it fulfills the Queen's jaw tightened. Let the council decide. Meanwhile, Kelia stood in her chamber again, staring at the mirror, touching the mark that wouldn't fade. For years, she had trained to be calm, wise, and distant, the perfect royal heir. But now, everything inside her felt wild. Uncertain, alive, she had broken rules, yes. But something deeper inside her whispered that this was not a mistake. It was fate. In the next room, Jace read an old scroll given to him by a quiet servant. It told the story of an ancient union, a time when a human-like star traveler and an Illyrian warrior had shared the first soul mark ever recorded. He looked up at the door and wondered if Kelia knew this same story, and if maybe their story was the next one to be written at midnight. A message arrived for Kelia. She was ordered to stand before the council the next morning. No explanations, no details, just a summons. She folded the message and held it tight in her hand. Outside, the wind blew through the towers like a quiet warning. The bond was growing. The law was watching, and time was running out. But deep in her heart, Kelia made a silent promise. She would not let them take this away without a fight. Not the mark, not the bond, and not the boy who had touched her soul without even trying. Secrets beneath the skin. The council hall was cold and carved from black stone. Its high ceiling filled with floating crystals that hummed with silent energy. Kelia entered with slow, measured steps, her head held high, though her heart beat. Like a war drum, the 13 counselors stared down at her, their faces hidden behind silver masks, tradition hiding their judgment. Jace was not allowed inside, but he waited just beyond the sealed doors, pacing like a caged animal. Kelia stopped. At the center of the hall, standing on the sacred circle etched into the floor, a voice spoke from the center throne. Deep and sharp, Princess Kelia, daughter of Queen Thalira. You are here under law to answer one question. Kelia bowed her head slightly. I am ready. Is the soul mark real? The voice asked. And do you accept it? Kelia raised her eyes, unshaken. Yes, the soul mark is real, she said, and I accept it. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Some soft, some angry, some stunned. One counselor stood quickly. Then she has chosen a human over her own kind. Not chosen, Kelia said calmly. The mark chose him outside. Jace waited until a silent figure approached from the shadows. It was the old servant who had given him the scroll, her eyes glowing faint blue. You must come with me, she said softly. There are things you need to understand. Followed her through a narrow hallway beneath the palace, into the ruins of a forgotten chamber filled with strange lights and symbols. This place is forbidden, he whispered. And forgotten, the woman replied, until now. In the center of the room stood a tall glass cylinder with a small stone cube floating inside. What is that? Jace asked, stepping closer. Memory, she said. A record from your ancestors. The cube glowed as Jace reached toward it, and images burst into the air like smoke and fire stars. Ships' voices in alien tongues. He saw a man like him, standing beside a woman who looked like Kelia, their hands joined, a soul mark glowing between them. Who are they? He asked, eyes wide. They were the first, the woman said. Ah, you are not the mistake, Jace. You are the return, back in the council chamber. Kelia was still standing firm as questions flew at her like arrows. What? If this bond weakens our blood? What if the people rise in fear? What if the ancient curse returns? Kelia answered each one with calm defiance. But inside she was hoping, praying that Jace was safe. Then the doors opened, and Jace walked in beside the old servant, their steps echoing like thunder. He didn't wait for permission. He just looked at Kelia, then turned to the council. You want proof? He said. You want reason. He raised the scroll in one hand and pointed to the old servant with the other. She showed me something buried, something you chose to hide. He placed the cube down in the center of the circle. And once again, the memories rose, not as smoke this time, but as pure light. The council watched the same vision Jace had seen, two bonded beings. One human, one Ilarian, saving a world together. They were real, Kelia whispered. They were the start, and we, Jace said, turning to her, might be the continuation. The queen rose from her hidden place behind the chamber, stepping forward without guards. She looked at the light, then at Kelia, then at Jace. And her eyes softened for the first time. Perhaps this bond is older than our fears, she said, and stronger than our laws. One counselor stepped forward, removing her mask. If the mark is truth, we cannot deny it. Still, not all. We're convinced, and whispers of rebellion stirred in the corners. Later that night, Kelia stood beside Jace on the palace balcony. Watching the stars, why do I feel like something bigger is waking up? Jace asked. Kelia looked at the glowing mark on her skin. Because it is. She placed her hand over his. And a soft pulse of gold passed between them in that moment. Both of them saw something in their minds, not a memory, but a future, a world not divided by species, but united by understanding, and somewhere deep in the shadows of Ilaria. Eyes watched them carefully, whispering in forgotten languages. The ancient bloodlines had stirred, and the bond was no longer a secret. What had once been forbidden now stood in the open, daring the world to try and stop it. Asterisk the trial of proof. Asterisk the stars hung low over Ilaria that night, glowing brighter than usual, as if the heavens were watching what came next in the heart of the palace. The sacred amphitheater was prepared, a place not used for over 2 centuries. This was where the trial of proof would happen. A soul resonance test so ancient, most thought it was legend. Now, for the first time in generations, it was being opened again. Kelia stood in silence as elders dressed her in a white ceremonial robe woven with silver threads. Jace, alone in another chamber, wore a simple tunic lined with ancient runes he didn't understand. Neither of them spoke, but their hearts beat in rhythm, like a drum echoing across invisible space. When the time came, they were led to opposite ends of the arena under torchlight. The crowd above watched without speaking. The queen among them, her face hidden behind a crystal veil, a priestess, stepped into the center and raised both hands. By law and legacy, the trial of proof begins, she announced. Kelia and Jace stepped forward, entering the circle from opposite sides. Their eyes never leaving each other. They stood only one step apart. No word spoken, no movement made. Then, the priestess called out, "Touch hands, and let the resonance speak." Kelia reached first, her hand trembling slightly. But sure, Jace met her halfway. And as their palms pressed together, the circle around them lit up with golden fire. Everyone in the crowd gasped as a giant ring of light pulsed outward. The flames rose but did not burn, swirling around them like a dance. Jace's mind suddenly opened, not just to memories, but to feelings that weren't his. He saw Kelia as a child, running through tall gardens, laughing with a sister long lost. He felt her loneliness, her fear of failing, her hunger to be more than just a royal name. Kelia saw Jace's past too, growing up in a scrapyard on Earth, fixing broken machines, his mother's laughter, his father's early death. She felt his quiet strength, his grief, his hope hidden beneath tired eyes. The crowd fell completely silent as the two glowed brighter than the torches. Their hands still locked, Kelia whispered softly, "You're not just my soulmate. You're my mirror." Jace whispered back, "The part of me I didn't know was missing." The soul mark on her neck began to spread, glowing like a web of light reaching her collarbone and across her shoulder. And then, to everyone's shock, a matching mark appeared on Jace's arm, golden and warm. Spiraling outward like a living tattoo, the priestess stepped back, her voice filled with awe. The bond is complete. It cannot be undone. The queen stood slowly, looking down at them with tear-filled eyes, but not all were moved. In the far corner of the crowd, a sharp-eyed alien in black armor whispered into a cum. "They've passed the trial," he said. "Begin the operation that night." As celebrations began in the palace, masked rebels moved through the shadows of the lower city. Their goal was not the couple, but the ancient records, the only proof that such bonds had existed before. They wanted to erase it, so the bond would seem like an accident, not destiny. Meanwhile, Kelia and Jace sat alone in the Star Garden, both quiet, holding hands as the plants around them bloomed under their shared light. Kelia rested her head on his shoulder, something she would have never done days ago. "You saw everything," she said, "even the parts I hide." "I saw beauty," Jace replied. "And pain that never broke you." She closed her eyes. Then, "You really are mine." Suddenly, an alarm echoed through the halls loud, urgent, shaking the air. A royal guard rushed into the garden. Eyes wide, "The archives have been breached." Kelia stood immediately, her voice sharp. "Protect the records, now." Jace ran beside her as they followed the guard through secret path. Smoke filled the hallway as they neared the archive chamber. Fire spreading fast. Rebels in dark armor were inside, throwing ancient scrolls into burning pits. Without thinking, Jace charged in, grabbing a burning piece of cloth and swinging it at one of them. Kelia used her energy pulse, blasting two of them back against the wall. She reached into the fire and pulled out a glowing cube, the memory stone from before. One rebel lunged at her, but Jace tackled him from the side. Taking a blow to the shoulder, more guards arrived, and the rebels fled into the tunnels, leaving smoke and ruin behind. Kelia knelt beside Jace, her hands glowing softly as she pressed against his injury. "You're hurt," she whispered. "I've had worse," he said, with a wince. "Was the stone saved?" She held it up. Still glowing, "Yes. Then we win." He smiled, and even as flames licked the walls, Kelia smiled back. They had passed the trial. Not just of the soul, but of fire and choice. Now their bond was more than light and prophecy. It was earned, tested, and unstoppable. Rebels among us. The smoke from the archive fire still rose into the night sky. But in the alleys below, shadows were already moving again. The rebel leader, a tall figure with metal scars across his face, stared at the glowing footage of the soul resonance trial. "She chose him," he growled, and the mark confirmed it, behind him. Other rebels whispered, angry and afraid. "If this spreads, our bloodlines will mix. Our history will fade," one said. "She defies the old code," said another, "and the people cheer her for it." The leader turned sharply, his voice cold. "Then we must remind them what fear feels like." While the rebels planned in the dark, the palace above glowed with celebration. Jace sat on the steps of the Star Garden, his shoulder wrapped in light band cloth, as alien children passed him giggling. They reached to touch his hand, fascinated by the golden mark now etched on his skin. He smiled kindly, but pulled away each time. Not out of fear, out of caution. Kelia stood nearby, watching him with quiet pride. "You've become a symbol," she said gently. "Some worship you already." "I'm not a god," Jace said, shaking his head. "I'm just the guy who touched the wrong girl." Kelia smirked. "Or the right one." Suddenly, an energy blast echoed through the courtyard, not part of the festival. Not planned, screams followed as guests ran in every direction. Guards drawing weapons and forming shields. Kelia grabbed Jace's arm. Pulling him toward the inner halls, a royal advisor shouted. "There's been an attack near the crystal well, the rebels," Kelia said, her eyes flashing with fury. "They want to stop the bonding from spreading." Jace didn't hesitate. "Let's go." They raced through secret passageways known only to the royal family, but Kelia had memorized every turn. At the crystal well, which powered the cities, upper layer chaos had already begun. 2 guards lay unconscious, and dark-cloaked figures were attaching explosives to the central crystal. One of them turned and saw the princess approaching. He shouted something in code, and the rebels turned. With weapons drawn, Kelia raised her hand and released a pulse of energy. Knocking 3 off their feet, Jace ran to the crystal. Pulling wires and smashing the detonator, sparks flying into his face. A rebel charged him with a blade. But Kelia intercepted, spinning low and striking hard. The blade flew into the air, and the rebel dropped, groaning. The last attacker, the scarred leader himself, stood firm and hissed. "This ends tonight," he growled, pointing a plasma rifle at Kelia. "No," Jace said, stepping between them, hands raised. "It begins tonight." The rebel fired without warning, but before the beam hit, the soul mark on Jace's chest flashed. Blinding gold, forming a shield of pure energy around him. The beam bent, twisted, then vanished in midair. Everyone froze, including Kelia. The rebel stared in horror. "What?" "What are you, Jace?" Stood tall, breath shaking but unbroken. "I'm proof." Kelia stepped beside him, her voice like thunder. "And you're done?" Guards swarmed in, capturing the remaining rebels as medics rushed to the scene. The crystal was safe, the bond untouched, and the people began to chant the princess's name from nearby rooftops. Later that night, Kelia and Jace stood alone on a balcony overlooking the moonlit plains. She leaned on the railing, quiet, her face lit by soft silver light. "I thought I lost you back there," she said. "You almost did," Jace replied. But something inside me said, "Not yet." Kelia reached out and touched the mark on his chest, still faintly glowing. "The bond protected you?" she whispered. "That's not just rare, it's unheard of." Met her gaze. "So what now?" She looked out over the lights of the city. "Now we don't just survive," she said. "We lead, but the rebels won't stop." He warned. "No," she agreed, "but neither will we." She turned to him fully, taking both his hands. "I don't want to hide this anymore," she said. "Not the mark, not the feelings, not the future we saw in that light." Jace nodded. Slowly, his heart calm for the first time since arriving on this world. "Then let's build that future," he said. Below them, citizens gathered, lighting small candles in honor of the soul bond. And in the darkness of space, far beyond Ilaria, ancient machines, long forgotten, began to stir awake. Because something old had been triggered, something powerful. And it all began with a single forbidden touch. Asterisk, the Queen's choice. Asterisk, the royal court had never been so full. From every corner of Ilaria, nobles, scholars, and leaders had gathered. Under the great dome of stars, their faces serious, their voices hushed. At the center stood Queen Thalira, her crown resting heavier than ever. Beside her, Kelia waited silently, dressed in deep violet robes stitched with the ancient sign of unity. Jace stood to her right, wearing formal Illyrian attire. The golden soul mark, visible through a cut in the sleeve, glowing softly in the light. Everyone had seen the bond, the trial, the attack, but now came the hardest part. The Queen had to choose. Allow her daughter to stay bonded to a human, or dissolve the bond by force through ancient rite, a process that risked both lives. One elder stepped forward, voice echoing, "The bond has caused unrest. Your Grace," the rebels still whisper. Another said, "And more will rise if we do not act, but she saved the city." A younger voice replied, and the soul mark protected them both. The Queen raised a hand, and silence fell like a blanket over the room. She looked at her daughter, then at Jace, and finally out across the crowd. In the old days, she began, soul marks were a blessing. Then came fear, and with fear, rules. She stepped down from her high throne and walked slowly toward. Kelia, you were born to lead, my daughter, she said, but destiny had other plans. She turned to Jace, her eyes unreadable. You came here by accident, she said, and yet you've changed everything. Kelia stepped forward. Her voice firm. I won't deny the bond. Mother, I've seen his heart. She said, I felt his past, his pain, his dreams. He is not just a human, he is my equal. Jace swallowed but stood tall. I never asked for this, he said, but I won't walk away from it either. A murmur swept through. The crowd, some nodding, some shaking their heads. Then the queen did something no one expected. She removed her crown and placed it on a nearby pillar. The crown is not just a symbol, she said. It is a burden. And today, I pass that burden. Gasps filled the chamber as she turned to Kelia. From this day forward, you are queen, she said, and your choices are now law, Kelia. Froze, her eyes wide. Mother, are you sure? I've never been more certain, the queen replied. The old world has ended. You must lead the new one. Kelia bowed deeply. Emotion thick in her voice. Then I will lead with truth, not fear. She turned to Jace and reached for his hand in front of everyone. Their soul marks flared gold again, lighting the room in soft, living fire. The people rose to their feet, some still silent, some cheering loudly, but far from the celebration. In a cold mountain bunker, the remaining rebel generals watched the broadcast with rage. They turned her into a goddess. One spat, and now the humans will flood in. The scarred rebel leader, who had survived the palace fight, stood slowly. Then we flood them first. In the palace, Kelia stood before the people now. No longer princess, but queen of Ilaria. She raised both hands, and the crowd quieted again. We are not the same as we were, she said. The bond has shown us what connection means. Jace and I are not here to erase the past. She continued, we are here to build something new. A future where soul marks are not hidden, where love is not bound by species. Jace stood beside her, hand tight in hers. I come from a world that once feared difference, he said, but learned that survival depends on trust. Ilaria has given me a chance, he added, and I promise to give back more than I take. The people listened, and though not all believed yet, something had shifted. Later, in a quiet garden under the stars, Kelia and Jace sat alone again. No guards, no robes, no rules. He looked up. You gave up everything. She leaned her head against his shoulder. No, she said softly. I claimed it. He smiled. So what now, Queen? She smiled back. Now we see if peace can truly grow, but deep in the soil of the stars. Something ancient stirred. A machine older than any soul mark. Older than memory itself. It had been waiting, watching, and now it moved again. Because the bond wasn't just destiny, it was a key, and the final door was about to open. Soulmates beyond stars, the stars above Ilaria shifted, just slightly, as if space itself had breathed. In a quiet chamber deep beneath the palace, the ancient machine pulsed to life for the first time in thousands of years. Its core glowed faint. Gold, the same color as Kelia's soul mark, now shared by Jace. They didn't know it yet, but the universe had started listening. On the surface, Ilaria was calm. People worked, laughed, healed. Some still whispered doubts, but most now watched. Their queen with new eyes, Kelia walked among them freely. No guards, no crown. Only the soul mark glowing like a silent promise. Jace was at her side, always, not as a prince, but as a partner. Together, they rebuilt trust, brick by brick, hand in hand. Then one morning, everything changed. A tremor shook the palace, not violent, but deep, like a voice calling from beneath the bones of the world. Kelia and Jace ran to the lower chambers, guided by ancient sensors. They stopped at a sealed door neither had noticed before. As they stepped closer, both their soul marks glowed brighter. And the door responded. It opened with a soft hum, revealing the great chamber beyond. Inside stood the machine. Tall, silver, half buried in crystal roots. Kelia stepped forward slowly. "What is this place?" A voice echoed from the machine. Not male or female, not Illyrian or human, but something deeper, older. "This is the Ark of Harmony," it said, "and you are the first soul bond to awaken it since the stars fell silent." Jace looked around, eyes wide. "You're alive?" "I am memory," it replied. "And function." Kelia's heart pounded. "Why now?" "Because the bond is complete," the voice answered, "and the key has returned." Images filled the chamber, not with light, but with feeling. They saw ancient beings, human-like and Illyrian-like. Once united by soul marks across systems, they built peace, shared knowledge, and seeded planets, until war tore them apart. And the Ark was hidden away, waiting for another true bond to find it. "You carry their legacy," the voice said, "and their burden." Jace stepped closer. "What does it want from us?" "To lead," the machine said, "not just Illyria, but the alliance they once began," Kelia whispered, "across the stars." "Yes," the Ark said, "but not alone." In that moment, a signal pulsed out from the machine, silent, invisible, but strong, far in the galaxy, on distant worlds. Similar machines woke from sleep, all connected by the same language. Of light and love, Kelia turned to Jace, her eyes wide but clear. "We were never meant to stop here." He nodded slowly. "We're the start again." They left the chamber changed. Not by power, but by purpose. Over the next days, Kelia called a summit, inviting not just Illyrian leaders, but human ambassadors and others who once stood apart. She revealed the Ark, the message, the truth behind the soul marks. Many wept. Some protested, but none could ignore what had been shown. The bond was real, and it had awoken something too big to bury again. Jace spoke little, but his presence said enough. He had come from a scrapyard on Earth, and now stood at the center of a legacy reborn. The people called them many things: the Golden Bond, the living flame, the echo of the first link. But to each other, they were just Kelia and Jace. Two souls that had touched by accident and changed the galaxy by accident too. One night, as they looked out at the stars, Kelia took his hand and smiled. "I used to think fate was cruel," she said, "that it would never choose me, but it did." Jace replied, "It chose us," leaned against him, heart full. The stars above shimmered again, but this time they didn't seem so far. Because soulmates once joined don't just share love, they share destiny. And their destiny was no longer bound to Illyria. It was calling from worlds they hadn't yet seen, people they hadn't yet touched, and lights that hadn't yet glowed. So they made a plan, not to rule, but to guide, to carry the old peace into the new age, to remind the galaxy that connection could be stronger than blood, than war, than fear, and long after they were gone. Children would sit under twin moons and whisper their names, not as gods, not as rulers, but as the two who touched and lit the stars again. The end.